Hello, hello, hello. This is HQ, and we're going to play the democracy docket. I'm sorry, the democracy docket. And we're going to play the gerrymandering game, and we're going to find out what they're doing across the country to stop people from gerrymandering, what they're doing to counteract gerrymandering, and what other people can do. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
From red state gerrymandering to litigation to blue state redraws. And by the end, I'll give you 3 things you can do right now to help protect free and fair elections in 2026. But before we get into it, subscribe to this channel to stay informed about how you can defend democracy. Anyone who follows my work or frankly is paying attention to democracy knows that Donald Trump and the Republican Party is waging an all-out attack on free and fair elections. Donald Trump is terrified that he will have a Republican Congress after the 2026 midterm elections. Republicans in Congress are obviously terrified because they'd lose their jobs. And this is all coming to a boiling point in one particular area, and that is redistricting, right? If you wanted to pay attention right now to the one thing that will tell you what will happen in the midterm elections, it is the congressional redistricting process. Now, normally, in 2025, smack dab in the middle of a decade, you would expect there'd be virtually nothing going on with redistricting. But earlier this year, Donald Trump engaged in a strategy, a cynical strategy, a dangerous strategy, a strategy that threatens the future of free and fair elections across this country, aimed at retaining power after 2026. And that strategy is, in a nutshell, this. He went to states where Republicans control all branches of the state government, both houses of the legislature and the governor's mansion. And he told them, we in Washington, D.C., not you in the states, we in Washington, D.C., are going to send you new maps. And we're going to expect you to enact these maps. We're going to expect you not to question these maps. We're going to expect you to betray your constituents with these maps. You're just going to take what we give you, and you're going to smile, because we are the Republican Party in Washington, D.C., and we have the support of an authoritarian wannabe, Donald Trump. And so we have been watching this unfold over the course of several months now, and it has taken various twists and turns. In some states, Republicans have been successful. In some states, they've been successful so far, but they're being sued. In other states, Democrats have picked up the mantle and said, you know what? If this is how Republicans want to play, we're going to play the same game. And so what I want to do is walk you through what this looks like so that you can understand both the threats here, the possible outcomes here, and also what you can do to be part of the solution. So I need you to watch to the end of this video, because before we're done, we're going to talk about how you can help save democracy. All right, let me start by giving you kind of where we are so far. So I've broken this into several categories. And the first category we are going to talk about are the states where Republicans have already re-gerrymandered their maps. Now, why do I say re-gerrymandered the maps? Because in each of these states, Republicans had already gerrymandered their maps in 2021. So in none of these states were we starting with fair maps. We certainly weren't starting with maps that favor Democrats. I mean, we were starting with heavily gerrymandered maps. And these 3 states that we're going to talk about first are Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina. Okay, so Texas got a lot of the attention because it was the place that Donald Trump started. Why did he start there? For the same reason that Willie Sutton robbed banks, because it's where the money is. No, in Texas, it's not where the money is, it's where the seats are, right? Texas is a big state, and there were lots of opportunities for Republicans to screw over minority voters. That's what they did, screw over minority voters in order to gain more safe Republican districts. In particular, they redrew the map to add 5 Republican districts. Now, to be clear, they did it on the backs of minority voters, illegally, by targeting minority voters. How do I know that? Because that's what the governor of Texas told us he was doing when he called a special session. He was responding to a letter that came from the Department of Justice saying, you need to dismantle these coalition districts, these minority coalition districts, because we think they're illegal. And we need you to draw new districts. Well, the problem there is that led Texas to racially gerrymander, right? I mean, they drew maps to literally dismantle naturally occurring coalition districts. I mean, the fact that Black voters and Hispanic voters happen to live near each other and they both support, for example, Democratic candidates, is not a rationale to then say, well, we're going to separate these voters and destroy this natural coalition district. But that's what they did. All right, so that's where they started. They started in Texas. And we all watched as the Texas Democrats in the legislature left the state, and then they came back, and then the map was introduced by the Republicans. And in the dark of the night, in the middle of the night, they jammed it through the legislature. Well, here's the thing. Before dawn broke, my law firm had already sued them. That's right. There's a big lawsuit that we're waiting for an outcome. And that lawsuit was covered extensively by Democracy Docket. It was a 10-day hearing, 10 days of testimony, 10 days of argument. And as we are recording this video, we are waiting for the outcome there. And the outcome for whether or not Texas gets away with this or not will tell us a lot about what's going to happen in 2026. Now, it doesn't tell us everything because there are other states. We're going to cover a lot more states. But it's a really good jumping off point, because a lot of the things that were happening in Texas are what we see elsewhere. For example, you may not know this because the legacy media doesn't cover this. Democracy Docket covered it, but the legacy media didn't cover this. That the map that was drawn by the person, the Republican in Washington, D.C., he testified at trial that he did it at the direction of the White House and the RNC. That's right, not at the direction of the people of Texas. Actually, not even with the input of the people of Texas. He didn't give a shit what the people in Texas thought. He produced a map that the White House wanted, the RNC wanted, and then he sent it to Texas. And they were told, you pass this map. That's the key here, guys. Everybody needs to focus on this for a moment. None of this is happening because Republicans in the states want this. None of this is a grassroots movement of Republicans. It wouldn't make it right, by the way. It would still be wrong, right? I mean, it would still be wrong to gerrymander, these maps more grotesquely than they're already gerrymandered. It would still be wrong to target Black and Latino voters. But to have this being done by the White House adds a whole new layer to what's going on. Because Donald Trump is an authoritarian. He's not a map drawer. Donald Trump wants to rig the outcome of the 2026 elections. And he doesn't care whether he does it through voter suppression. He doesn't care whether he does it through military deployed in the cities. He doesn't care if he does it by trying to ban mail-in voting or trying to ban in-person early voting or trying to impose universal ID. Donald Trump's not a big thinker, okay? Donald Trump just knows what he wants the result to be. And the redistricting effort that we saw in Texas, that we're going to talk about it elsewhere, you have to understand it as part of this overall program. All the dots connect. The voter suppression dot, the military in the cities dot, the banning mail-in ballots, the misinformation and disinformation about what happened in 2020, all the election denialism, all of this is part of laddering up to, in 2026, depriving you, the American people, of free and fair elections. All right, so we started with Texas, but we're not going to end with Texas, right? So Texas, 5 seats, that's in court. We're waiting for a court decision, and that's what happened there. Then Republicans rolled through to Missouri and basically repeated this, but on a smaller scale. Why on a smaller scale? Because they'd already gerrymandered almost as much as you humanly could, as you possibly could in the state of Missouri. So what they did is they targeted one district in Kansas City and essentially carved Kansas City up into 3 different pieces, obliterated Kansas City on the redistricting map. And the result is no more Democrat. Now, what do you think the racial composition of that district was? That's right. This was a district where Black citizens of Missouri in Kansas City could elect their candidate of choice, who was and is Emanuel Cleaver, a Black member of Congress, a reverend. long-standing member of that delegation. Well, that preference by those black voters will no longer be heard in the state of Missouri because
you all understand what's going on. It's called gerrymandering. They're changing the maps. The Republicans are changing the maps so they eliminate black congressional people from the House of Representatives, Hispanic representing people from the House of Representatives. They're redrawing the maps. That's what gerrymandering is. They're redrawing the maps so they eliminate districts in which you have a black representative or Hispanic representative so that they can draw more Republican seats instead of Democratic seats. That's what he's talking about. Okay? You got to listen. He is the lawyer across the country that is in charge of leading the charge.
The White House doesn't want it to be. Now, isn't it coincidence? 2 states, and so far all we're talking about are districts held by Hispanic and black members in Texas and a black member in Missouri. Now, you keep totals because we're not done counting those up yet. But that's where we are in Missouri, except once again, my law firm filed a lawsuit almost immediately. Other lawsuits as well were filed in Missouri. Those lawsuits are moving forward. And by the way, anyone who thinks that these lawsuits are going to take too long, oh, no. We litigate fast. We litigate aggressively and we litigate fast. Like that's one thing. One thing Republicans know about me is I'm aggressive. Steve Bannon says, I'm evil, but I'm a fighter. I'm not evil, by the way, but I am a fighter. And we move fast. And so we're going to try to get relief. We're going to do everything we can to get relief in Texas and Missouri and all the rest of the states we're talking about for 2026. So that is where we are in Missouri. They carved up this one district to create an additional Republican seat, but litigation is pending. All right, now let's move to North Carolina. I think you could argue that pound for pound, the North Carolina Republicans are the most partisan vote suppressor, racial gerrymanderers in the country. Now, I know you're saying that's quite a tall order because some of you are saying your own state meets that criteria or some other state you think meets that criteria. But I would actually give the award to North Carolina. I mean, remember, it was North Carolina Republicans in 2013, before Donald Trump, passed a voter suppression law that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals struck down for targeting African Americans with near surgical precision. That's what they said. Literally, that was 2013 Republicans. So you can imagine what the Republicans are like today. At one point, Republicans gerrymandered a map so aggressively that they said the only reason why there were any Democrats left is because it was not physically possible to gerrymander further. I have sued North Carolina over their gerrymandering, and I have won. In fact, I won a case in the U.S. Supreme Court, the conservative U.S. Supreme Court, dismantling the racial gerrymandering that the Republicans in North Carolina did in the last go-around. And so here we are. They pass another map. It is a preposterous gerrymander, but they have now come back and improved on that from their standpoint by targeting North Carolina 1, the 1st congressional district. Now, I bet you can guess what the racial composition is of that district and the Democrat who represented. That's right. Once again, they targeted a district where black voters have a large say in the election of the candidate who wins that election, who happens to be Congressman Davis, a black Democrat from North Carolina. So that's the district they targeted. And that is the district that is now the subject of yet again new litigation. My law firm brought almost immediately. Again, other plaintiffs filed litigation as well. And so that case is also pending before the courts. In Texas, it's before a federal court. A hearing's already been held. We're awaiting a decision. Missouri, those cases are in state court. North Carolina, those are in federal court. So those are the 3 places where Republicans have already accomplished, from their standpoint, their effort to subvert the will of the electorate, to try to deny voters in those 3 states of maps that give them some fathomable chance of electing candidates of choice, and instead replaced terrible gerrymanders with grotesque gerrymanders. Now, notice in all three of them, we are suing. So I don't want anyone thinking that there's no hope. I don't want anyone watching this video and saying all is lost. If you're in that crowd, you know what? Turn this video off. Go watch a cat video. Go watch a video of something else. But if you're in the all hope is lost camp, then you're in the wrong place, because I am not an all hope is lost kind of guy. I recognize the threats that we face. No one is selling you, sugar water here. I recognize that democracy is under attack every single day. I know, because I take a lot of the slings and arrows that come from Donald Trump and his cronies. But I also understand that if we fight hard and we fight to win, we are going to win more cases than they think we will. And we're going to catch some luck, and we're going to catch some breaks. And if we do all that, we may just come through the other side of this with a democracy intact. But it's going to take hard work from the lawyers, it's going to take hard work from the activists, it's going to take hard work from politicians, and it's going to take hard work from you. And like I said, stay to the end of this video, because I'm going to tell you what the work is I need from you to do. And I'm just about to talk about the next category of states. Do me a favor. The team at Democracy Docket works every single day to keep you informed about what is happening to democracy in court. And that includes voting rights, it includes redistricting, it includes all of the terrible things that Donald Trump is doing. And what I ask you to do is become a Democracy Docket subscriber today. There are free newsletters, there is premium options, but either way, the links to all of that are in the description of this episode. So please become a subscriber today. Now, we've talked about where Republicans are done, but let's talk about where Republicans are going, because there's a whole new wave of states that Donald Trump is telling that they need to do his bidding next. And yeah, some of these states are feigning, well, no, we're not going to do this. They'll all cave. Believe me, they'll all cave. So let's start with the ones who are not just going to cave, but they're going to cave enthusiastically, and then we'll get to some of the more reluctant. So Ohio Republicans have to redistrict. Why? Because they gerrymandered last time. The clock ran out, and so they got to pass a new map. Ohio is sort of complicated and frustrating. There is a bipartisan commission in the state, but it's kind of a sham because it's controlled by Republicans. And so what's happening there is they've basically gone to the Democrats and said, look, you either accept a pretty gerrymandered map. I mean, let's be clear, they already have a gerrymandered map. And so this will be an even more gerrymandered map. You either accept this or we're going to impose something even more draconian. So Democrats are going to make that deal. As a result, this is going to be a bad deal for Democrats, but they kind of don't have any cards here. It looks like what's likely going to happen there is that there will be what the legacy media will no doubt call a bipartisan compromise. There was no bipartisanship here. This was a Republican demand that Democrats either acceded to or faced even more draconian map. So that's probably what's going to happen there. Probably, therefore, no litigation, at least not in the near term. But Republicans, again, will wind up picking up, depending on how you look at it, between 1 and 3 seats as a result of this. And, that is terrible for democracy, and shame on the Republicans for continuing to do this. But that's Ohio. Next up will be Florida. Now, Florida won't be up next in time. Florida is up next in certainty. Florida has a later legislative session than everyone else, which is the reason why you're not hearing much about it. Their legislature meets in the dead of the winter, which, by the way, if you're in Florida, kind of makes some sense. So they're not going to do their new gerrymandering project until their legislature meets at the beginning of next year. But make no mistake, they have already said they're going to call a new session. They already said they're going to gerrymander. Ron DeSantis is, if nothing, he is a anti-democratic sycophant of Donald Trump at heart. And so you can expect the worst of the worst to come out of Florida. In fact, I think if there is a competitor for North Carolina, it's gonna be Florida. And Florida is a state that I have sued before. My law firm and I have sued over all kinds of things. We sued them for banning food and water in line. We sued them for passing voter suppression laws. We sued them, they had the audacity to actually pass a law several years ago. It's actually one of the laws I can't even believe when I say it out loud, that said that you could put an early voting center in any public building in the state, except a public building on a college campus. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, that's the law. That was it. It was like, yep, early voting everywhere except, on college campuses. So we sued, we won, that got struck down. So that's no longer the case. So, but anyway, I've also won, by the way, a big redistricting case in the state of Florida. For a brief period of time, Florida actually had very fair maps, and it had fair maps because we sued Florida under its state constitution, which bans partisan gerrymander, bans going after minority voting strength, and bans favoring an incumbent or disfavoring an incumbent. Well, look, Ron DeSantis doesn't care about any of that. He's going to ignore all of that. And so the map that they're going to pass is both going to be an extreme partisan gerrymander that will target Democratic incumbents because they're Democrats. It'll violate all of those amendments. And so don't sleep on Florida. There's going to be litigation in Florida. There will be more litigation in Florida. And I think that Ron DeSantis is going to get so greedy and so arrogant that he's going to give away the game. And so watch what happens in Florida, not just what they do, but watch how quickly litigation gets filed right away afterwards. All right, after those two, there's then three others that are sort of kicking around that I want us to keep paying attention to. Indiana, Kansas, and Nebraska. In one form or another, the Republicans in state are claiming, oh, no, we're as pure as the driven snow. Bullshit. In every one of these states, there are Republican gerrymanders. Okay, there are no good Republicans. I did a whole video about how there are no good Republicans. You should go watch it. But there are no Republicans who have done the right thing when it comes to the maps that are already in place. The question is, how bad will they make the maps? And will they hold out any shred of control or dignity in their state, or are they just going to cave to the White House like the other states have? My bet is Indiana caves, Kansas maybe caves, Nebraska probably doesn't cave. So like 1.5 to 2 of those 3 wind up caving. And in each one, it will look very much like the story we've laid out, right? In Kansas, if they go after any district, it'll be Sharice Davis. In Indiana, they've got a couple to choose from, but it will, as likely as not, target seats that not just the Democrats control, but where black voters make up a significant part of the population. And in Nebraska, if they do something in Nebraska, it will be aimed at Omaha, right? So that's what we know with that second wave of states, right? These are the states Republicans haven't yet done anything with, but it is not going to be a surprise if they do something. And what I can promise the Republicans out there, because there are Republicans who watch my videos. I occasionally they hate the videos, but they hate watch them. So hello, Republicans hate watching the videos. Here's the thing: you're gonna get sued because you're gonna break the law. You're gonna target minority voters, which is gonna break not just the law but the Constitution. And you may even violate your own state constitution. And if you do any of those 3 things, you're going to get sued fast. We're going to sue you in time for 2026.